Imagine a future lunar base where astronauts dine on fresh fish grown right on the moon. It sounds like science fiction, but the Lunar Hatch project aims to make it a reality. It's a bold idea to raise sea base in space as a food source for researchers. For the first time in history, fish are planned to be cultivated not for experiments, but as a regular source of nutrition for crew members. This documentary overview will explain why humanity needs a fish farm on the moon, how the Lunar Hatch project works, what challenges scientists face, and what opportunities this initiative opens up. Scientists have already successfully grown plants in space, harvesting lettuce, tomatoes, and potatoes aboard the ISS. The next step is to provide astronauts with complete protein sources. Fish is considered an ideal candidate. It's rich in easily digestible protein, contains omega-3 fatty acids and B vitamins necessary for maintaining muscle and human health in microgravity. Beyond nutritional value, the presence of an aquarium with fish may positively affect astronauts' psychological well-being by adding a touch of living nature to a remote environment. The Lunar Hatch project was born in 2019 at a research center near the sea in the town of Palavas-les-Flots in southern France. There, specialists from the French National Institute for Ocean Science, IFREMER, breed sea bass. Their offspring will become the first aquanauts in history. The idea belongs to marine biologist Dr. Cyril Przybilla, who submitted it in 2016 to a European Space Agency competition for the Moon Village Base project. After receiving support from the French Space Agency, CNES, in 2018, the team began to investigate whether it would be possible to successfully raise European sea bass, Dicentrarchus librax, hundreds of thousands of kilometers from Earth. Why sea bass? Out of hundreds of fish species, they chose those best suited for closed system conditions. Moderate oxygen needs, low CO2 emissions, rapid growth and reproduction, and most importantly, resilience to external influences. European sea bass fits these criteria and has already been well studied in IFREMER's aquaculture. Moreover, its eggs and embryos proved remarkably resistant to the factors they would face during space travel. I suggested sending not fish, but eggs, because the eggs and embryos are very strong, notes Przybilla. Small fertilized fish eggs are easier to transport, and their development can be synchronized with the timing of the space mission. Before sending sea bass eggs into space, scientists conducted numerous tests on Earth. In the laboratory, they simulated all extreme conditions that could affect fish embryos during a journey to orbit and beyond to the moon. Below are the main challenges and results of these tests. Rocket launch, vibration, and overload. Initially, the eggs were placed on vibration platforms that simulated the launch of the Russian Soyuz rocket, one of the shakiest carriers. The sea base embryos withstood intense jolts and noise, acceleration up to 5G, 5 times Earth's gravity, without developmental issues. After the shake, 76% of the eggs successfully hatched, only slightly less than the control group, 82% on Earth. For another species, the silver croaker, the success rate was even higher, 95% versus 92% in the control. These results amazed researchers. Fish eggs appear naturally ready for space adventures, perhaps because they also endured turbulent currents and storms in their native ocean. The next step was testing the effects of microgravity. On a special European Space Agency platform, the eggs spent 39 hours in a near weightless state. The results were encouraging. The larvae hatched successfully in the same proportion as on Earth. Even more surprising, larvae from the microgravity incubator hatched 6 hours earlier than those on Earth. The reasons behind this accelerated development remain unclear, but similar phenomena have been observed under other environmental changes on Earth. The newborn larvae behaved just like their Earth-bound counterparts, confirming that short-term weightlessness does not harm sea-based development. Flight duration and hatching timing. Researchers learned to program fish hatching time by controlling water temperature. At 14 degrees Celsius, the eggs develop in about 100 hours, roughly the same duration as a moon trip, 4 to 8 days depending on trajectory. Thus, if fertilized on Earth and immediately launched, sea bass larvae could hatch upon arrival in lunar orbit or on a base. This means tiny fish could be delivered to the moon, minimizing transport resource needs. Beyond the protection of Earth's atmosphere and magnetosphere, embryos are exposed to cosmic rays. To assess this risk, the Lunar Hatch team and the Institute for Radiological Protection, IRSN, irradiated hundreds of fertilized eggs with proton and neutron beams simulating cosmic radiation. Preliminary data suggest this factor is also not an insurmountable obstacle. If necessary, aquariums can be placed in shielded compartments or protected by water, which naturally absorbs radiation well. All possible simulations on Earth have yielded positive results. Now the project is entering its final testing phase, a real spaceflight. Several capsules with sea base eggs are planned to be sent to orbit and returned to Earth for detailed analysis. Of course, the same number of eggs will also be kept in a control aquarium on Earth for comparison. Next, the scientists hope to send the eggs directly to the Moon. The Lunar Hatch team is currently waiting for a chance to include their experimental capsule in the next launch. France's CNES and NASA are reviewing the proposal, although the exact date is still unknown. There is hope it will happen in the coming years. What would a fish farm look like on a future lunar base? Lunar Hatch proposes creating a closed-loop aquaculture ecosystem, an autonomous module where different organisms support each other in a life cycle with no waste. The project leader calls it a closed food chain on the Moon. The system would consist of several compartments. Water. Fish tanks would be filled with water extracted from ice at the Moon's poles. Water is a valuable resource, so it would be continuously filtered and reused in a closed cycle to avoid losing a single drop. Water recycling technologies already developed and used by IFRMR on Earth are being adapted for lunar conditions. Fish, sea base. These are the main protein producers. They would live in tanks with controlled conditions for optimal growth and reproduction. The system is expected to become self-sufficient in a few months, as new generations of fish are planned to replenish the population every 4 to 6 months. Microorganisms and algae. Fish waste, excrement, leftover food would not be discarded, but directed to a section with microalgae. Nutrients from the fish waste would serve as fertilizer for the algae. In turn, the algal biomass would feed other inhabitants of the system, filter organisms. Filters. Mollusks. The plan includes cultivating bivalve mollusks, like mussels, or zooplankton that feed on algae. They would filter and clean the water, and their collected biomass would become food for the next level. Bottom-dwelling organisms, shrimps and worms. Tiny shrimp and worms would consume leftover organic material and excrement settling at the bottom. They act as cleaners, recycling what was not digested before. These shrimps and worms would then become live food for the sea bass, completing the cycle. The result is a self-sustaining aquafarm. Fish feed the lower levels with waste, and the lower levels produce food for the fish. The goal of Lunar Hatch is zero waste. Everything is recycled in the aquaculture system, which should operate autonomously for 4 to 5 months, explains Persibilla. The scheme mirrors Earth's biosphere, only in miniature. After filtration by mollusks, water is returned to the fish tank, and the cycle begins anew. In addition to fish, the crew's diet would include vegetables grown in hydroponic greenhouses, fertilized in part by aquaculture waste. This means the fish farm integrates into the broader life support ecosystem. Calculations show that a closed system with about 200 sea base could provide 7 astronauts with 2 servings of fresh fish per week for 16 weeks. 2 fish meals a week per person is an ambitious yet realistic goal. If the lunar colony expands, the farm can scale by adding more modules or introducing other seafood species like mollusks or shrimp. Similar systems are also being considered for Mars, following the same principle: maximum autonomy and full resource cycling. Although an edible fish farm in space is a groundbreaking idea, fish themselves have ventured beyond Earth before. The first fins in space belonged to tiny mummicog fish, Fundulus heteroclitus, launched to the Skylab space station in 1973 as part of a NASA mission associated with the Apollo program. Astronauts brought 2 adult fish and 50 eggs in a special plastic aquarium. The mummicogs survived the launch and microgravity, learned to orient themselves in water without gravity and even success. 3 years later, in 1976, Soviet cosmonauts on the Salyut 5 station conducted a series of experiments with a guppy aquarium. They observed guppy reproduction in microgravity and tested closed-loop water supply technologies for the aquarium. These pioneering studies demonstrated that fish can survive and behave more or less normally in spaceflight. Interest in space ichthyology revived in the 2010s. In 2015, the ISS received an aquarium with tropical zebrafish, Danio rario, to study muscle atrophy in weightlessness. Zebrafish are a popular model organism, and the experiment confirmed that in microgravity, their muscles weaken similarly to humans, helping in the search for solutions against sarcopenia in astronauts. In 2022, China delivered several zebrafish to its Tiangong station to study vertebrate development in space. Additionally, over recent decades, other species have been flown into orbit: swordtails, medica, Japanese ricefish, goldfish, and even oyster toadfish, mostly for scientific purposes to understand the effects of weightlessness on vertebrate development, balance, and aquatic behavior. The Lunar Hatch project will be the first to use fish in space specifically as a food product, not just as experimental animals. This marks a fundamentally new approach, combining biological research with the practical goal of supporting expeditionary needs. Thus, Pshibila's team continues the legacy of their predecessors, building on their insights while pioneering a new field, space aquaculture.